how much money you should have saved at every age. This is a video that's been made many times before by most big finance YouTubers. And for the most part, all of the YouTubers kind of say the same thing. They talk about how much money some random article online says we should have saved up depending on your age. But I've got a bone to pick with my fellow creators, because I don't agree at all with the amount of money they recommend you should have saved. And some quick math proves how the amount of savings they suggest having is not going to put you on track to be financially independent, even by the time you retire. But more on that later. I wanted to do my own spin on this whole how much you should have saved question. And I'll still reference what these articles suggest we should have saved, but for the most part, I'm going to give my own take on what level of savings/investments we should be shooting for in our 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on. And I'll also cover the major money milestones I think we should all be hitting at every age, and how to actually accomplish these goals so that you can get ahead of the majority of people your age that go through life living paycheck to paycheck. Starting out at age 20, there aren't any good recommendations online about how much you should have saved at this age, but I was able to find one source that claims 20-year-olds have an average net worth of negative $27,129. So if you're in your 20s and you are debt-free, give yourself a nice pat on the back, because you are way ahead financially compared to most people at your age. I think it's safe to assume that the main culprit for 20-year-olds having a negative net worth is student loans and maybe car loans. My own recommendation for age 20 is to try to get a net worth of $0 as soon as you can. That's right, having a net worth of $0 at this age can put you in a great position to build wealth in the future. This will mean living frugally, so that you can pay off any student loans or other debt you might have as soon as possible. If you manage to pay back all of your bad debt and achieve a net worth of $0, the next step in your 20s is to save up an emergency fund. This should cover 3 to 6 months of your mandatory expenses and serves as a cushion in case you lose your source of income or run into any unexpected expenses. Unexpected events such as losing your job can really set you back on your financial independence journey, so this one just ensures that doesn't happen. Once you've saved up an emergency fund, I recommend that you start investing your savings. This is how you're going to be able to grow your savings to the amounts of money I'm about to recommend you have saved at age 30. You should start investing what you can into a tax-advantaged account such as a Roth IRA. That way you won't have to pay taxes on any of the investment gains you make over your lifetime. As far as investment recommendations, I, of course, recommend investing into a broad stock market index fund, such as VTSAX. I don't want to go into too much detail on why this is a great investment, but if you're curious, you should check out my channel because I talk about this stuff a lot. Finally, it's a really good idea to get a beginner credit card so that you can start building your credit score. A card like the Discover It secured credit card is perfect because Discover approves everyone for this card, as it's intended for people that either don't have a credit score or have a bad score. Building up your credit now will bring you a lot of benefits in the future. With a good credit score, you can qualify for lower interest rates on things like mortgages when buying a house, which will save you tens of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. Overall, I think your 20s is such a crucial age when it comes to your finances. Making a few wise decisions now can really set yourself up financially for the rest of your life. At the age of 30, most recommendations online suggest having 1 times your annual income saved. I found out that the average salary at the age of 30 is $49,920, so that means they recommend having about $50,000 in savings or investments at age 30. I think it's also worth mentioning that this suggestion is much higher than the actual median net worth of a 30-year-old, which is about $14,000. But even though the recommendation is much higher than what 30-year-olds on average have, I still think $50,000 is too low. If you want to be on track to retire comfortably, I recommend having double that amount, $100,000. The reason why I recommend $100,000 will become clearer as we go through the video, but to put it simply, having $100,000 invested into a tax-sheltered account like a Roth IRA will put you on track to be able to retire with a substantial amount of money that, when invested, will last forever. A few other money milestones I would recommend achieving in your 30s is buying a house. The reason I recommend this is because when you buy a house, you'll most likely finance it with a 30-year-long mortgage, meaning that if you can manage to buy a house in your 30s, you will be able to pay off the entirety of your mortgage by the time you retire. And with no mortgage, your living expenses will be fairly minimal. Also, putting the financial reasons aside, most people in their 30s have kids, or at least want to start having kids soon. And it's not exactly ideal to still be renting an apartment whilst raising a family. So just for the sake of having a good quality of life, I think it's best to quit being a renter and become a homeowner when you get into your 30s. And I know you might be thinking that the milestones I'm recommending of saving $100,000 as well as buying a house in your 30s are pretty optimistic. The buying a house milestone might be especially difficult if you live somewhere expensive like California, where real estate is also very expensive. But honestly, if you follow the advice I gave for your 20s of getting out of debt as soon as possible, saving an emergency fund, and putting away a good amount of money each month into investments, this is surprisingly achievable. And in the case that the house you can afford in your 30s is not your dream house, well, later on in life, you can always rent out your first home instead of selling it, effectively turning your starter home into a nice investment property, whilst you go ahead and buy your dream home. That's what I'm planning to do in the future at least. I was able to buy my first house last year when I was 22. And yes, despite what some people think in the comment section, I am actually in my early 20s. Anyways, even though I really like the home I'm in now, it's more of a starter home, and one day in the future I'd like to purchase my forever home. And it doesn't have to be anything insane, but I would be lying if I told you that I didn't want a home that was like 3,000 square feet, has a big backyard, and is in one of the nicer suburbs. So when I am in the position to afford my dream home, I'll just put my current home up for rent, creating a convenient source of passive income. Okay, so there is one more money recommendation I have for your 30s, and this one is really important. Your 30s is the time to really up the amount of money you invest each month. I recommend investing at least 15% of your gross income. So if you make an average salary of $50,000 a year, you should be investing at least $7,500 a year, or $625 a month. Moving on to your 40s. At this age, most recommendations online suggest having 3 times your annual income saved. I found that the average salary at the age of 40 is $58,603, so that means they recommend that you have about $175,000 in savings or investments. And just like before, this recommendation online is much higher than the actual median net worth of a 40-year-old, which is about $91,300. Of course, you already know that my recommendation for all of you is much higher, at $300,000. You see, if you were able to have the $100,000 I recommended having invested at the age of 30 and invest 15% of your annual salary, which is $625 a month for the average earner, then assuming you achieve the average inflation-adjusted stock market return of 7% annually, you would ultimately end up having about $300,000 invested by the age of 40. So if you literally just follow the approach I'm recommending, at 40 years old, you will own your own house, have $300,000 invested, and have a net worth that is over 3 times the average person your age. I feel like your 40s is more of a time to take it a little bit easier and reward yourself for all the hard work you put in years prior, whereas your 20s and 30s were more of a time to hustle, get out of debt, and save aggressively. And I know most finance YouTubers will probably recommend just saving and investing as much as you possibly can your whole life, but I prefer the approach of actually making use of a portion of your money while you're still young enough to enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, your 40s aren't that young. Your back might hurt a little and your knees might click every time you go to pick something up, but you should still be young enough to at least enjoy the benefits of having some spare cash. It's better to start spending some of your excess cash now, rather than living life like you're in poverty from the ages of 20 all the way up to age 65, just so that you can save every dollar you make so that you can retire with $20 million in your bank account. And I bet at that point, your savings will feel just like an imaginary number on the screen to you, because you would have never experienced what your money can do, or who it would help. My overall take on your 40s is that since you will likely be making more money than you did in your 30s, as long as you can continue investing 15% of your annual income, feel free to spend some of your leftover cash on things you enjoy. Otherwise, you'll likely regret not doing so later in life. Your 50s. Most recommendations online suggest that at this age, you should have 5 times your annual income saved. And since the average salary at age 50 is $59,904, that means the experts online recommend having about $300,000 in savings or investments at age 50. But luckily for you, if you were to have followed my advice, you would have already reached that number when you hit 40. So you'll have like 10 years on these guys. The median net worth at this age is only $168,600, which I don't know about you, but to me that sounds like a scarily low amount of wealth to have, considering at age 50, there's really not that much more time until you retire. I recommend that you have around $700,000 saved. And once again, that number comes from continuing to invest 15% of your gross income through your 40s and receiving a 7% return on your money. Now that you're in your 50s though, one thing I would recommend is reallocating a larger percentage of your investment portfolio into safer, less volatile assets. When you're younger, it's more reasonable to invest into riskier assets, such as growth stocks, which are more likely to grow your capital faster than other investments. That's because when you're younger, if you were to experience a stock market crash, you still wouldn't need to touch your retirement money for decades, so there's no risk of having to sell your investments at a loss. But as you get older, there'll be less time until you retire, and you're in less of a position to weather a stock market crash. You wouldn't want to put yourself at risk of your more volatile growth stocks crashing by 50% right at the time when you need to start cashing out your retirement money to pay for your living expenses now that you're not working. So as you get older and the closer you get to retiring, your risk tolerance should be lower. At age 50, I recommend starting to put a larger percentage of your portfolio into safer investments such as blue chip dividend stocks and even bonds, which tend to perform far better than the overall stock market during market downturns. Okay, age 60. This is the last age group I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to assume that no one wants to still be working beyond the age of 60. I don't, that's for sure. At this age, experts on the internet recommend that you have 7 times your annual income saved, which works out to be about $417,000 for the average earner in the US. Also, the median net worth of a 60-year-old is about half of that at $212,500, which is honestly mind-blowing to me, but it does explain why 40% of older Americans rely exclusively on Social Security for retirement income. In my opinion, the online recommendation of having 7 times your income saved, or roughly $417,000, is also far too low, and having this sort of money will likely result in you having to deplete your retirement fund. I recommend having around $1.4 million. I know that sounds crazy, but at this point in the video, I think you know why it isn't. And that's because if you literally just continue to invest 15% of your gross income, starting with around $700,000 at age 50, and average a 6% inflation-adjusted annual return, I'm assuming a lower return this time because you would have moved your investments into safer assets like how I mentioned, then you'll reach $1.4 million. That's right, you literally don't have to do anything different. Just continue investing at the same rate as before and watch your money compound to numbers you never thought were possible. And the reason having over $1 million is important in retirement can be explained by something called the 4% rule. This is a rule of thumb financial planners use to determine how much money you're able to withdraw from your investment account each year without reducing your overall balance. If we apply the 4% rule to my recommendation of having $1.4 million invested, we would take the $1.4 million and times it by 4%, which equals $56,000. So $56,000 is the amount of money we would be able to withdraw from our investments every year without ever reducing our principal investment amount, meaning our money would last forever at this rate of withdrawal. And I feel like having a solid income level at around the $50,000 range is important when you retire, because it allows you to be able to enjoy a comfortable lifestyle, despite no longer having to work a full-time job. And hopefully by now, you should have paid off your house, so your expenses will likely be lower. This will allow you to be able to go on vacations as you please, and use your money for good reasons, such as paying for your children's college tuition so that they can get a financial head start in life that you may not have gotten. And this is why I'm so against all the sources online that tell you what you should have saved. I honestly feel like the other YouTubers that made a video on this topic missed the mark, and just went along with the recommendations that they read on a random article online. I mean, if we were to apply the 4% rule to the recommended savings at age 60 of $417,000, we would only be left with $1,390 a month, which is definitely not enough to live on in the US, unless you live somewhere like Jenks, Oklahoma. And sorry if you happen to be one of the 21,812 people living in Jenks, Oklahoma, because this is the second time that I've roasted that town in my videos for absolutely no reason. And I've never been there, so who knows, it might be a nice place. Anyways, the point I'm getting at is that you can't live on $1,400 a month, so you'll likely need to withdraw more than the 4% a year from your investment account to cover your living expenses, which means you'll be at risk of your investment principal gradually getting smaller and smaller, which will soon become unsustainable. And since the last thing you want to worry about when you're old is money, let's all just play it safe and shoot for $1 million plus retirements. And if you happen to live somewhere that's expensive, you might need even more than that, in which case, get investing, guys. But that's all for today's video. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe. It really would help out my channel. But I'll see you in the next one. Take care.